"Come see our baby. You must be so envious being single," Sharon said with a triumphant smile. Her expression was the same as it was 2 years ago. Sharon and I, who were coworkers, were thought to be best friends by those around us. Indeed, I thought so too. But to Sharon, I was just someone to use. She stole Neil, my fiance, and left the company. Left behind, I quietly thought to myself, I will not forgive Sharon, nor Neil who abandoned me. It seems the moment for my revenge has finally come. I narrowed my eyes and stared at Sharon. My name is Marcia, 27 years old. I graduated from a fairly good university and got a job at a reasonably large company. There, I fell in love with Neil, and after 1.5 years of dating, we got engaged. Neil was older and good at his job. He was popular with the women in the office, and I was filled with pride. But stronger than the sense of superiority was the happiness of getting to marry Neil. Even my best friend Sharon blessed our union. At that time. "Congratulations on your engagement, Marcia." "Thank you," I said with a smile. I was so happy because I loved Neil so much. Neil also smiled at Sharon. Having friends to celebrate with, Marcia must be talented in being likable. Not at all, I shook my head, but it felt good to be said that. That day, Neil, Sharon, and I were together in my apartment after work. Sharon and I sat opposite each other across the table, clearly seeing each other's expressions. Sharon seemed genuinely happy for me. "How did the two of you start dating?" I made the first move. I was aggressive, even insisting on dates. It's a common story, but I made lunch and went to various places. "Got me with her cooking," Neil said shyly, patting his stomach. Neil looked young for his 30s, with a firm stomach. That alone made him a fiance to be proud of. "Speaking of which, Marcia, you suddenly started taking cooking classes." "Oh, don't mention it," I said, flustered. Sharon was innocent, probably without any ill intent, but to me it felt like a secret was being revealed. Seeing me flustered, Neil laughed. "All that for me? I'm touched." "Well, I did love you, Neil." I turned beet red and hung my head in embarrassment. The awkwardness was too much. I stood up from the chair and fled to the kitchen. "Getting some beers," I announced. "Yeah, thanks," Neil waved. In the kitchen, I sighed heavily, taken aback. Sharon had moments like this sometimes. She would, with a smile, share things inconvenient for others. It was my fault for letting my guard down around Sharon. With that thought, I opened the fridge. At that moment, laughter erupted. It was Neil and Sharon. "Really? Is that true?" "Absolutely! Marcia would bring her failed cooking attempts for lunch every day. I tasted some and it was awful. But it was delicious when Neil ate it, right?" "Of course. The presentation was beautiful too." "You tried really hard, Marcia." Sharon laughed, seemingly impressed. I hurried back to them with the beer bottles in hand. "Stop it, Sharon. Enough with that story." "I thought you'd have shared it already, being engaged and all," Sharon retorted, her smile fading into a pout. "Neil, look at her. Marcia is so strict with me." "Sharon." "Just kidding." She laughed again, regaining her smile. I felt uneasy about Sharon's unapologetic demeanor. From that day, Neil's behavior towards me gradually became more distant. "I've got a night shift today," he would say, and stopped dropping by my apartment. At first, I thought it was just work. But then one day, while talking to Neil's colleague, I discovered a shocking truth. "Neil's been busy lately, huh?" "Nah, our department is slow right now. No overtime." "What?" I was stunned. When I confronted Neil about it, he hung his head, looking guilty. "Lying to me, what were you thinking?" "Sorry, Marcia." "Wait." I wonder how long she had been listening. There stood Sharon. She stood next to Neil, not me, and took his arm. "I've been keeping him. Recently started cooking classes inspired by Marcia. Neil's been tasting and giving advice. Wait a minute. I couldn't grasp what Sharon was saying. I glared at Sharon, filled with rage. Imitating me? What's your intent? And Neil is my fiance. Isn't it strange for you two to meet secretly? Nothing strange, Sharon twisted her mouth. It was a creepy smile. I never knew Sharon could make such a face. Not strange? I think if Marcia had a chance, then I have the right to try under the same conditions. And so... Sharon nestled close to Neil, a nasty grin on her face. Neil prefers me over Marcia now, she declared. What? I looked at Neil, disbelieving. What was Sharon talking about? It had to be a cruel joke. Neil, you're done for the day. You don't have to entertain Sharon anymore. Sorry, Marcia. Neil muttered an apology in a low voice. Before I could say anything, he hugged Sharon. Wait a minute. I've always liked Sharon. You were always there, Marcia, honestly getting in the way. But I thought I'd marry you because you were so devoted. What are you saying? Sorry, Marcia, but that's how it is, Sharon said as they embraced, a triumphant look on her face. Thank you for your hard work. From now on, it won't be decorative Marcia, but me, whom Neil truly loves, supporting him. Wait, how can you... I felt darkness closing in on me as despair crawled up from my feet. Sharon and Neil hurried away. The next day, Neil broke off our engagement and announced his new engagement with Sharon at the office. 2 years have passed since then. Any negative talk about Neil was drowned out by his career advancement. I've endured the company's pity and cold laughter, continuing to work until today. Until I met that person. Is that Marcia over there? Sharon? A voice I didn't want to hear called out. There she was, walking across the street on a leisurely weekend afternoon. Why did I have to run into her? Sharon was draped in brand-name bags and accessories. Given Neil's current status, such luxury was not out of reach. Marcia, are you still living in that apartment? Why do you want to know? Just wondering, maybe I'll come visit again. Or maybe you can come to my place. Yeah, that'd be better. She was being presumptuous. I grimaced and turned to leave, but Sharon called out from behind. Come see our baby. I know it must sting being single. Sharon... I sighed and stopped in my tracks. Turning back, I saw Sharon smiling with that same triumphant look from 2 years ago. Fine. When should I come? Sooner the better. How about tonight? You must be free, right? I'm not free, but I'll come. Definitely. Great. Sharon's smile twisted. That night, I drove following the map I received. Neil and Sharon's house came into view, a grand and tasteless structure, just like Sharon. I'm here, Sharon. Been waiting, Marcia. How does it feel, the air of a married couple? Must be tough for a single like you, but bear with it, okay? Don't bother. Cutting off Sharon's chatter, I said, Let me introduce my family then. Sharon's face froze in astonishment. What? But Marcia, you're single, aren't you? I might not be wearing a ring, but... I'd like her to wear it, though, interjected Sullivan, standing behind me. Sullivan is my husband. He's a decade older and has been divorced, but that makes him all the more appreciative of our marriage. Sharon, what are you doing here? Oh, Neil, long time no see, I greeted casually with a wave. Neil first looked surprised at my face, and then was shocked to see Sullivan. The president? Sharon, hearing Neil's voice, panicked. No way! Ignoring them, Sullivan laughed. Nice to meet you. I'm Sullivan, Marcia's husband, and this is our daughter, Risa. Pleased to meet you, Risa bowed, her neatly trimmed hair swaying. Risa is 9 this year, Sullivan's child from his previous marriage. She's mature and composed for her age. So, Sharon, what do you think of my husband and daughter? What do you mean, what do I think? Sharon screamed, her face turning red. How come you're the president's wife? Hearing Sharon's outburst, I remembered how I met Sullivan. It was at the company cafeteria. I was down, eating alone, tired of the snide remarks, when Sullivan approached me. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing," I replied. "But—" I looked up at Sullivan, cautious. He was tall, I had to look up to see his face. But none of that mattered at that moment. I think I had become indifferent to others, so I didn't mind sharing my story about Sharon with him, as it was already well known in the office. "Those are terrible people," Sullivan said, his face contorting with anger. "It's my fault for not being appealing. Everyone says so." "No, you're not to blame. They are." Sullivan was the first to tell me that. I was so happy that I called him my savior. Savior? "Yes, you've made me feel so much better, so you're my savior." As I started to leave, Sullivan looked at me seriously and said, "If I'm your savior, then let me rescue you." That's how we started dating, and the gossip about me began to fade. I don't know why at the time. I only found out Sullivan was the president after he proposed. Of course, the office gossip stopped. After all, I am dating the president. Why didn't you tell me? It was hard to bring up, but I really want to be with you, Marcia. Sullivan smiled awkwardly, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. By then, I had also gotten to know Risa. She started calling me Mom. So, I became Sullivan's wife, and just recalling it makes me smile. Never thought Sullivan was the president, but now I'm happy. "Yes, you must be," Sharon replied, biting back anger. "You're the president's wife, after all." "It's not just that. Sullivan is kind and thoughtful, and Risa is sweet. I'm happy to have them as my family." "So you came here to flaunt that?" "How tasteless," Neil interjected with misplaced irritation. "I didn't come here of my own accord. Sharon asked me to come, and I just obliged." "Is that so, Sharon?" "Well—" Sharon's face turned almost tearful. In the midst of their agitation, Sullivan cheerfully said, "I promoted Neil as a thank you for how well you treated Marcia, but that ends today. From now on, I will make Marcia happy, and Neil, you will return to being a regular employee." "What?" Neil exclaimed. Understandably so. They must have bought a house based on the current income, but if they lose their position now, the income will drastically decrease. "No joke!" Sharon cried out. "You can't do this just because you're the president. We have a baby to take care of." "If you both work, you can manage," I said matter-of-factly. "Time to part with those luxury brands." "You're the worst! Marcia, you're the worst!" Sharon wailed. Neil, resigned, began to console her. "Let's go home," I suggested. "Right." I started walking away with Sullivan and Risa. Sharon's cries echoed behind us. Neil's demotion caused a stir in the company. "He wasn't exceptionally talented. I'd like to replace Neil with someone more capable," Sullivan mused. "How about it? Want to give it a try?" he asked me. "Me? Impossible." "You're a hard worker, and I believe you'll meet my expectations." "Thank you." Though apprehensive, I accepted the position. The world changed overnight. Those who once talked behind my back were now wary of me. Please handle it." "All this alone?" Neil protested at my directive. Even so, Neil started working quickly even before I could say anything. He was desperate to somehow make his way back up the ladder. According to Sullivan, he had little chance. "Why has it come to this?" "Focus on your work, not complaints," I told Sharon, who had returned to the workplace. She seemed financially strained, and the colleagues' treatment was chilly. Everyone was aware of our past conflicts, and it was clear I was the victor in this battle. No one dared to oppose me in the company anymore. During a break, Sharon approached me while I usually ate lunch alone. She seemed embarrassed as she spoke. "Marcia, please, forgive me. I can't take it anymore. Neil's salary has drastically reduced, and we've had to let go of everything, even our house." "Forgive you? For what?" I sighed, unimpressed. Sharon looked plain and unlike herself. Her makeup couldn't hide her pallor, and her hair was unkempt. This is Sullivan's decision. My work is recognized, and I'm likely to advance. I've regained my rightful place. That's all there is to it. You have the president as your backing, Sharon raised her voice. I shrugged in response. I don't need to work, given Sullivan's income, but I continue because I find fulfillment in my current job. Don't get too cocky. Sharon, calm down. I looked around. Sharon glanced around too, noticing other employees watching us from a distance. She suddenly became tongue-tied, realizing any further outburst would only worsen her situation. On a different day, Neil also spoke to me, pleading for his old position back. Being bossed around by former subordinates, don't you think it's harsh? They seem to enjoy dumping all the work on me. That must be hard. I offered a voice of detached sympathy. I used to love Neil. We were even engaged. But now I felt nothing more than a distant pang of empathy. I am Sullivan's wife now, loving him and Risa as my own daughter. I've moved on from any love for Neil. Keep up the hard work. You have a child with Sharon, don't you? Sharon neglects parenting, the child suffers. I regret it. If only I had stayed with you. And then what? I looked at Neil with cool detachment. I used to think he was a kind man, dreaming of convenient fantasies, utterly delusional. I'm glad I never married you. Now I know your true nature. Neil looked lost as I returned to my work. I have my own struggles, an unimaginable workload compared to before, and the pressure of zero tolerance for mistakes. But I also feel a greater sense of fulfillment. I feel like I finally found my place here. Sharon and Neil, both increasingly haggard, kept coming to me alternately. It became distasteful to watch their decline. Please, I was possessed 2 years ago. Forgive me. Tell your husband, surely I should be in a higher position. It's a waste to leave me as a mere employee. That's for Sullivan to decide. I had stopped engaging with them. Sharon and Neil always talked about money. Moreover, it seemed there was trouble in their marriage, often arguing in public. Finally, Neil declared, I'll leave Sharon, I will. So Marcia, let's start over. Don't be ridiculous. My voice carried a hint of irritation. I love Sullivan and Risa. You and I are over. That can't be true. Somewhere in your heart you must still think of me. He was delusional, always so self-serving. I had no words for him. Speaking felt like a waste of breath. Sharon appeared, seemingly having eavesdropped on our conversation. She confronted Neil with a raised voice. What are you saying? You never take care of the child, always complaining. I didn't know you were that kind of woman. They started arguing. I quietly stepped away from the scene. Soon after, they apparently got divorced, as neither works at the company anymore and I only hear rumors. I can't hope for advancement here anymore. I'm sick of everyone. Neil resigned in disgust. Sharon left the company around the same time. Even afterwards, she appeared several times outside the office begging for money, but I refused. You need to make an effort on your own. Don't say that. As the president's wife, you must have plenty of money. Don't talk like that, I retorted, frowning. Sullivan's wealth exists as a result of his hard work. It's not as if it just sprang up overnight. That would be unfair to Sullivan. But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears for Sharon. Heartless, you're no friend! That was the last thing I heard from Sharon. I laughed to myself. Friend? We stopped being friends when you took Neil. Maybe we were never friends to begin with, I muttered to myself. I continued working at the company, but after discovering my pregnancy, Sullivan and I decided I would leave. Income was never a worry. Now I could spend more time with Risa. Let's talk a lot from now on, Risa. Okay, the baby will be fun too. Risa smiled, patting my growing belly. Sullivan watched us fondly. Risa got a baby brother named Sullivan after his father. Sullivan! Sullivan! Risa was very attached to Sullivan. She was mature for her age, but clearly yearned for more family time. She became more affectionate, and I felt even more love for her. "Mom, Sullivan smiled. Do you think he knows I'm his big sister?" "Maybe he does," I proudly stroked Risa's head. Sullivan often came home late due to work, concerned about missing family time. "Why don't we go out this weekend?" I suggested. "Where to?" "Anywhere. A barbecue, amusement park. Let's make the most of the time we have together," I said. Sullivan's eyes sparkled as he took my hand. "You're a genius, Marcia." "Let's not talk about that. Let's go see the kids sleeping." When I made the suggestion, Sullivan also nodded in agreement. We went hand in hand to the kids' room. Risa was sleeping peacefully in her fluffy bed. "She's grown so much," Sullivan whispered, touching her cheek gently. Risa smiled in her sleep, likely dreaming sweetly. Next to our bedroom, baby Sullivan slept in his crib, a faint fuzz of hair beginning to show. He resembled Sullivan more, but my husband insisted. "He's like Marcia," and with that he laughed. "More like you, especially around the mouth." "Maybe, but his eyes are just like yours." We laughed softly, agreeing to disagree. Life had its hardships and unpleasantness, but I knew I was undoubtedly happy now.